Hi, ladies and gentlemen. Hey, a lot of things coming up this week and this month. Wow, some big news. Of course, the Democrat Communist Socialist Convention coming up next week. Will Kamala come out of that convention as the nominee? A lot of questions because several large groups within that party still not happy that the elite hierarchy, members of their party, gave the nomination to her without any consult among the people within that party. So the Democratic National Convention next week, another big piece of news. Also, big dates in September regarding President Trump's legal issues, including a possible sentencing on September 18th. Not been reported a lot lately, but Judge Merchan up there in the case involving Alvin Bragg in New York set to go to a decision in September. All of this and much more. Today, ladies and gentlemen, The Right Side with Doug Billings is now upon you. Are you ready? Let's go.
Hey everybody, my name is General Mike Flynn, and I'm here to do a big shout out for my great friend and one of the best in the business, Mr. Doug Billings. Right side with Doug Billings, right side with Doug Billings. Doug is the future of the airwaves when it comes to independent broadcasters and podcasters. He is the new Rush Limbaugh. He's exactly what America needs right now, looking for honesty, looking for wisdom, looking for truth, looking for patriotism. Listen to Doug Billings at Right Side with Doug Billings. God bless you and God bless America, and thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are winning. We're winning. Welcome to The Right Side with Doug Billings. Are you ready?
We are not liberal snowflakes who melt away in the face of tragedy, adversity, and challenge. We are a covenant nation under God, and His divine providence is not dead and it's not gone. It is living within each and every one of you. And you will bring it to life in such a way that the world has never seen before. We never back down. We never give up. We march forward.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to The Right Side with Doug Billings. Here we are, Wednesday, the 14th of August, and a lot of things coming up here. Real important dates that we need to have our minds on since the 1 billion X view night with Elon and Donald. It has been lost among us, I think, about these dates that are coming up. I'm going to remind you about that. And it's awfully good to be with you. Look, on X, on Facebook, on YouTube, the good people at worldview.com. We love those guys over there. Spreely TV, thank you as well. Also at dougbillings.us. Ladies and gentlemen, if you like the program and if you want to continue to receive this truth, this analysis of the state of play in America, I never charge you. We don't, whether you're watching on worldviewtube.com or Spreely or on my website, dougbillings.us, we never charge you for the program. But we do I ask that you prayerfully consider a recurring monthly donation over at dougbillings.us. It's how I continue to bring you the show, the truth, the analysis that you have been watching for the last 4 years. I appreciate you. Like I said, it's an honor of a lifetime, really, to have you with me on this journey that we're all on. Since the days of, we remember back 2020 when we had election integrity issues, there was a pandemic. Many of us, not just me, but you out there as well, probably had some course corrections in your life based on what happened. And so once upon a time, I was in corporate America. And now, because of all of that, I'm here with you speaking about the truth and the state of play in America. It's like God has called us, right? Tapped us on the shoulder and said, hey, I need you over here right now. Done a great job doing what you did before, but I need you to do this. And many of you, because I've traveled the country and I've spoken with many of you, you feel the same way, where you may have been in a position where you just didn't get involved in your local level of politics, where now you're paying attention, you're understanding that it's your local community, your county politics really that controls the destiny of the entire state in which you live, which of course changes and affects the destiny of the entire country. The founding of this country was based on a principle the founders thought states' rights were supreme to federal government rights. And we're all coming back to that. And it's because we've had conversations like this with each other that more and more people are becoming awake to not only the value of involvement, but also the terror, really, of what the deep state has done to us. And it was, we can talk about President Trump's accomplishments, for for months because there were so many of them. But I think key among them was that he pulled back the curtain of the deep state. And the deep state is still arrayed against him. We have some dates coming up that are important. And I wanted to make sure that today we talked about these things because I think they've been lost. You know, we had some excitement the other day with Elon Musk and Donald Trump on X, over 1 billion people. I think it's probably over 2 billion people now that have actually seen that interview, that conversation, which is all great news. Certainly Kamala Harris could never accomplish anything remotely similar to that. No one within the Communist Socialist, formerly known as Democrat Party, could accomplish anything remotely similar to that. I'm convinced of that. So that's all good news. But we still have deep state shenanigans going on and happening in the country, and I want to make you aware of that. Specifically, some big dates in September that are coming up regarding President Trump's legal issues, including a possible sentencing date. We have up there, remember this Judge Juan Merchan. He's once again come out just this week. He's denied President Trump's motion that the judge recuse himself from this case, which involves, this is the case that involves the Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg, just to kind of reset everyone on what this is. Judge Merchan is the judge that's overseeing the case being presented by Alvin Bragg, the entire kangaroo court up there in New York. But in early June, that kangaroo court that had a packed jury of never Trumpers. You can't get a fair, unbiased jury in that portion of New York, certainly not for President Trump. They found him guilty on those 34 counts of business records falsification. All of that, it's all temporary. I mean, but that's what they did. They found him guilty. It's one way or another. That's going to be thrown out either by a New York appeals court or, if not, then the United States Supreme Court. I have no doubt about that. So, but to lay this out for you, and before I go on, let me remind you that there are certain appeals courts and processes in New York. Trump may or may not win on appeal in New York, but that's okay. We still have the Supreme Court, the real court of the land, and the one who is not plagued by, at least not most of the time, plagued by partisanship. They will throw this thing out. So it's of all of the cases surrounding President Trump, the one in New York presented by Alvin Bragg is the most ridiculous of all of them. So it's not so much the fact that this motion that was filed by Trump attorneys for the judge to recuse himself was denied. It's not so much that, but what's interesting is that we should note that in that case, this judge has already signaled in a lot of different ways that he does, in fact, intend to sentence President Trump on September 18th. That's the date. We've all circled that date because I've told you, my friends, in past shows, it's my belief that when you look at this radical communist-socialist, formerly known as Democrat Party, and when you take a good look at that party's elite hierarchy, and the things that they've done ever since President Trump came down that escalator at Trump Tower, everything they've done since then, using lawfare against President Trump, I don't think they have any intention whatsoever to stop or to let up on these efforts to put Trump in jail. Why? Imagine yourself in their shoes. Why would you stop? In their view, they've got Trump right where they want him. And so we've got to brace ourselves for some things coming up. Now, you're hear me out on this in today's show because there's hope, believe it or not, at the end of the tunnel here. And it's not as bleak and as dark as it may seem, but we do have to prepare for what may come. So there's no way, in my mind, I can't see any way that this conglomeration of this communist-socialist, formerly known as Democrat Party, is going to stop their persecution of President Trump. I just don't see it. Why would they? Why would they go right to the edge and just say, okay, good, we got him right where that's all. That's as far as we want to go. Thank you very much. It's been fun. We've ruined your name. We've dragged you through the mud. We've tried to break you financially, but we're just going to stop right now. Not going to happen. You know that. These people are not going to stop until they see him either sentenced to jail or actually put in jail. So that's been their goal for the last 8 years. They don't just want to disqualify the guy from the presidency. They don't want him to be qualified to be dog catcher. And they want to try to break him financially. I know he's a billionaire. He's got a lot of assets, a lot of money. But look, Trump's money, no one's money is infinite, and to do damage to him financially is part of their goal. They also have the goal of putting him in jail, plain and simple. Put him in jail, or a combination of all of those things is what they would prefer. So September 18th, ladies and gentlemen, an important date. That would be, by the way, if you look at your calendar, September 18th, that is 2 days after early voting begins in 2024 in the battleground state of Pennsylvania. All of this is important in the landscape of the election. The Trump defense team has tried to stop this sentencing, obviously, and for good reason and cause, not just from a legal perspective, but from the electoral, the vantage point of election interference, because they'll sway people's opinions. This is what happened when Fetterman got elected. He was running against Dr. Oz in Pennsylvania. They opened up Pennsylvania, much to its shame, allows early voting to happen weeks and weeks, sometimes months before the actual election day. And you remember Fetterman went on, they had a debate that was broadcast, but it was only like a couple of weeks before, maybe even just a week before the election. So, but my point about that is that millions of people in Pennsylvania had already voted. They had not seen the mental dementia and decline that Fetterman had, the impairment that he had. But when that debate came out, wow, it was obvious, not a sharp guy. Had Pennsylvanians been able to see that months before, perhaps, because it was a close race between him and Dr. Oz, right? Perhaps Dr. Oz would now be in that Senate seat. So my point is twofold. One is they're going after Trump to sentence him 2 days prior to early voting in a battleground state. And we should really reconsider this early voting nonsense. Get back to election day. It's what the founders intended. So lawyers have, in any other case, Trump's team, they've asked for this thing to be stopped, the sentencing to be stopped. And those lawyers, if this were any other case, they have perfect legal grounds and precedents to ask this and to have it be granted, because it's happened before in New York. But because it's President Trump, it's likely not going to happen. So we prepare ourselves for this sentencing date. On July 1st, you remember this, it made big news. The Supreme Court ruled that presidents, that includes former presidents as well as current sitting presidents, are presumptively immune from criminal prosecution for any official acts they took as president. And the Supreme Court also found that in that case that absolute immunity if the president gets absolute immunity if the official acts are conducted as constitutional duties of that chief executive, the president, right? So you all remember that. Big deal. The radical liberals trying to convince us that this makes it a monarchy in America. Nonsense. We could go back and point out dozens of cases from presidents throughout time that were not pleasant acts, but they had to be done, whether those were during times of war or invasion or whatnot. Obama ordering a drone strike that killed American citizens over in Afghanistan and Iran. So those kinds of, he can't be prosecuted for that because he was acting constitutionally as president. Now, if a president screws up, there are mechanisms. You all know, we know there's the impeachment process. That's what the founders intended. If a president broke the law while in office, the impeachment process was there. And if he breaks the law as something done what's not a constitutional act of the president, then civil law and federal law can step in. So the monarchy nonsense, it doesn't really deserve much of a comment because it's just so intellectually immature. But this case, I think, with Bragg and Trump and New York, again, a kangaroo court, one of the most ridiculous of all the things that Trump is facing. It means that the prosecutors aren't. They gave evidence up there, I should say this, that they ordered the immunity, the immunity case up there was based on presidents taking constitutional action. Now, business filings in New York, a misdemeanor in all other cases except this. Bragg, and I'm going to get to this in a minute, Bragg, he construed the case so that the misdemeanor charge would go away and the statute of limitations would be void and so forth. What that means, all of this, is that the prosecutors have filed things that were not meant to be filed against President Trump. And they succeeded in convincing this, again, whether what you think about the jury or not, they convinced this jury to convict, and they did. And so that's the state of play. That's what we have to deal with. They are going to march forward with this. They're going to try to do everything they can to sentence Trump to jail. They want, if nothing else, they want that verbiage. They want to be able to say that we've got him. We've convicted him. Now he's sentenced. And this is all coming down. So New York prosecution of Trump, you've got to remember this. And again, I know that you know this, ladies and gentlemen. It was all politics. In that courtroom where you're supposed to shut the door and keep politics out, they opened it up and let it in. In a courtroom, it is supposed to be about justice, not politics. But you and I know, you can sense it a mile away, that it was all about politics in that courtroom. And again, that's why we call this, what Trump's going through and what they wage upon him, we call it lawfare, because it's not justice. There's no question that some of President Trump's official acts were used by Alvin Bragg to prove his case. See what I'm saying there? Some of President Trump's official acts as president were used by Alvin Bragg to prove his case. And the Supreme Court said you're not supposed to do that. That's unconstitutional. I mean, even 2 of Trump's White House staffers were called up as witnesses in that case. Now, of course, then Trump's legal team moves after that trial to have the verdict, the guilty verdicts thrown out. Of course, they move to do that based on the Supreme Court's immunity ruling. And it didn't happen. And along with that, they argued that Judge Merchan himself should be recused. I'll get to that in a moment. Very interesting to talk about. And there are some things here that will, I think, surprise you. Maybe not. Maybe you won't be surprised, because after all, you're the most intellectually mature audience in all of podcast land. Hey, I got to take a break. Ladies and gentlemen, make sure, please, to head over to DougBillings.us, DougBillings.us, and please kindly and prayerfully consider setting up a monthly recurring donation over there so that I can continue to meet with you just like this. I'll be right back after this break. Cheers.
The Right Side with Doug Billings.
Ladies and gentlemen, what if I told you that you could change the trajectory of your aging process? Look and feel better, live younger, be more active, less pain when you move around, sleep better, diminish the lines and the wrinkles on your face? Really? This is what I'm telling you. It's possible. You see, low stem cell activity happens when we get older. And it could be causing many of the health problems that some people have in the world today. Because as we get older, we have less stem cell activity, which means we age faster and we heal slower. The secret is a clinically proven and patented phototherapy non-transdermal patch, whose technology is the result of over 90 clinical studies and over 20 years of research. Your healthier life can begin today, and you can discover true age reversal. Age reversal, ladies and gentlemen. Please go to liveyoungerwithdoug.us. Liveyoungerwithdoug.us, ladies and gentlemen. Get over there today. Or if you'd like, text my name, Doug, to 41372. Doug, text it, 41372. And get over to liveyoungerwithdoug.us. Get younger, feel younger. I'm doing it. I'm wearing this patch. I feel great. And so will you. God bless you, ladies and gentlemen. For the Republic. Cheers.
The Right Side with Doug Billings.
I want to tell you about the good people over at EMP Shield, electromagnetic pulse, ladies and gentlemen. It can fry your home electrical system or your vehicle's electrical system. But if you attach one of these, now this is for your breaker box at home. There's a smaller version that goes on your battery of your car, your vehicle, that will prevent it from being fried in the event of an electromagnetic pulse. Because as you know, thanks to Administrator Biden, many people coming across the border now who don't exactly have the best of intentions. Protect yourself. EMPshield.com. Get huge discounts over there if you use the promo code Doug.
The Right Side with Doug Billings, where we meet in determined prayer and determined patriotism.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, coming to you from smack dab in the middle of the fruited plain of the United States, talking about September 18th, a big date for President Trump and the Judge Juan Merchan, Judge John Juan Merchan from California, from New York, in the Alvin Bragg Kangaroo Court case that's going on up there. So September 18th, a big deal, the sentencing date. Working through some details with you about this. I just don't think this has been reported thoroughly enough up there. And in light of and in the wake of all of the excitement we've had this week with, the appearance of Trump on X, with Elon Musk and so forth. Great news and great stuff. Of course, Kamala couldn't come close to doing anything remotely similar to that. I don't think she has enough insurance coverage. You know what I mean? Because doing something like that would cause Kamala some great harm. So not enough coverage for her to do something like that, nor could she physically do it, right? She's a terrible public speaker. She can't rely on anything extemporaneously. She cannot speak extemporaneously for great lengths of time. Got to have notes. You know the drill. She just can't do it. She's not smart. One of my favorite lines from that night was Trump was, going on about Kamala not being, she just can't do something like this. She can't do it. She can't talk this long. She's just not bright. She's not very smart. And Elon just chimes in and says, no, she's not. I loved it. It was a great night. And I think now we're approaching 2 billion views on that thing. Just phenomenal, a phenomenal thing. So in light of all of that, we have to now refocus on reality and get our bearings. Trump today speaking in North Carolina, doing another great job motivating the people in that state. It's a crucial state for us to win. But along with all of these things that we've been talking about, Judge Merchan up in New York, Trump's team wanting him to recuse himself for a few reasons, but primarily he has had a very profitable political connection. His daughter making lots of money for vice pretender Harris. And so there's a conflict of interest there. Judge Merchan's daughter on the Harris campaign team and making a lot of money. Not that I'm against making money, every right, but a judge and a daughter associated with the Harris camp, conflict of interest, right? I mean, I think most reasonable people would see that. Especially in light now, obviously, since Harris has replaced Administrator Biden on the top of that ticket. Not replaced by the will of the people, but by the will of the radical communist socialist, formerly known as Democrat, elite hierarchy of that party. So just yesterday, ladies and gentlemen, Judge Merchan denied this recusal motion from Trump's legal team in a letter that was written to both parties. And actually, he signaled his intentions in this letter. He also said that he plans to rule on Trump's immunity claim on August 16th, coming up. So just a couple of days, and we're going to have that ruling. So again, mark these things on your calendar and brace yourselves. Probably most important of all, Merchan laid in to both parties in this letter that he wrote and ordered them to prepare for court and to move ahead with a supposed imposition of sentencing on September 18th. So in layman's terms, stop the nonsense, stop with these petty requests for dismissals and denials and so forth. Prepare for court, because that's where we're going. And then that sentencing, of course, as I said, on September 18th. So he wants the lawyers, he told them so, to submit any arguments they intend to make on those subjects and to do it quickly. So the judge is losing some patience here, obviously. And in my opinion, there's a lot going on here, not only just in the verbiage of that letter and in the news and so forth, but if we read between the lines of what the judge said, we see some interesting things. In my opinion, ladies and gentlemen, I think Merchan has already made up his mind. I think that he's going to deny Trump's immunity motion, the immunity motion based on what the Supreme Court said. These judges aren't concerned what the Supreme Court says, and they may know full well, if they make such ridiculous rulings, that it will be ultimately overturned. But they don't care. That's not their goal. The goal is to get it out there that Trump was sentenced. That's their goal, as long as they get that out there. You see on social media, at least I do all of the time, the radical left is getting a lot of mileage out of these 34 convictions out of New York. Oh, he's a convicted felon. He's a convicted this, a convicted that. And, Stormy Daniels and the porn star and sexual assault, all of the things they're throwing at him. And I've said all along, look, they can make all of that ruckus and make it all day, every day. Those things are all going to go away. They're going to be either overturned or overruled, if not just outright thrown out. So they can rant and rave about all of that. And they try to do that because they think it damages, maybe to the weak-minded. But you, again, ladies and gentlemen, the most intellectually mature audience in all of podcast land, you know better than that. You are not swayed by that rubbish that the radical left throws out every day. But in between these lines, Judge Merchan has already made up his mind, folks. He's going to sentence President Trump. And brace yourselves. I think that chances are really high that as soon as that immunity case is, the request to dismiss it, as soon as it's rejected by Merchan, you're going to see right then and there an imposition of sentence given against President Trump. That's what I'm seeing. That's what I think. By the time he had written and issued this letter this week, I'm telling you, Merchan had several weeks to look at and to think about, to read and digest the Supreme Court's ruling on immunity. And Merchan also had several weeks to read and digest President Trump's legal team's request in their brief when they argued that the guilty verdicts should be tossed out. So Merchan has had time to read all of this, to think about it, to ponder it, maybe even asking advice and counsel from some of his friends, who knows. But the judge, after all of this, the judge has told both parties to get ready for sentencing. So that's the world we're living in. That's reality. And since he's stuck to that sentencing date, I think it's obvious that he doesn't have any intention of throwing out the verdicts as requested by Trump's legal team, or nor does he have any intention of recusing himself as was requested by Trump's legal team. It seems to me that he's rationalizing these things. In his mind, somehow Trump was not charged based on official presidential acts. And of course he was. We know that. But in Merchan's mind, he's rationalizing that Trump was charged on non-presidential acts. Somehow he's conflated that in his mind. And I think also he's thinking that Trump would have been convicted even if Alvin Bragg's prosecutors didn't introduce non-allowable evidence, which is what Bragg did. He brought into the court evidence that was not supposed, it was illegal to submit in a court. Now, Trump's team has made all of this known. And these are the grounds why I'm telling you this thing is going to be overturned or thrown out. As soon as it gets to a judge who is not partisan, there were so many mistakes in this case and in these decisions. I'm 100%. This thing gets to the door of the Supreme Court of the United States, it's done. And maybe even a 9-0 verdict from the Supreme Court. That's how severe these mistakes are. But again, the radical left judges, they don't care, because all they want is the image. They want you all to have the mental image of Trump being sentenced to jail. And they want their minions in the media and on social media to be able to say that. He's been sentenced to jail. September 18th. Now you're still going to vote for the guy. And we, of course, understand that it's nonsense, but that's what their goal. They want to besmirch and smear and diminish the man any way they can. They're not going to stop. And still, all of this, when you look at the ruling and what might happen, I think that second point, one that I said where Alvin Bragg introduced evidence in that court that was illegal. I said the word non-allowable. You can't do it. I think that's the point on which this thing will be overturned and thrown out. I mean, at trial, prosecutors described some of the testimony from Trump as just absolutely devastating. Well, you weren't. That was non-allowable evidence. It's going to be okay. Fine. Use your words. Try to smear his credibility. Try to smear his image. Talking about trying to smear President Trump. But Merchan had made dozens and dozens of outrageous rulings in that case, in that Alvin Bragg case. And I can't assume or expect him to change his mind or his course regarding anything right now. He's going to go forward with this. It's not his intention to be a dutiful judge. It's his intention to smear President Trump. That's my opinion. All right, ladies and gentlemen, DougBillings.us. Please head over there. Make sure that you prayerfully consider, please, a monthly recurring donation to the program so that we can continue to bring it to you. DougBillings.us. Ladies and gentlemen, it's how I come to be with you. I never charge you for the program, always for free, just asking, hey, if you like me, if you like the news, if you like this analysis that you can't get anywhere else, please prayerfully consider going over there and setting up a small recurring monthly donation to the program at DougBillings.us. Hey, I'm going to jump out, take a quick break. Please stay with me. I will be right back, ladies and gentlemen. Cheers.
TWC.health/Brandon. This is one of our sponsors, has been now for a few years. Here it is. You just go there. If you use that URL, folks, you not only save money, but our program gets credit, which helps us keep doing great shows like this for free and pushing them out. TWC.health/Brandon. Look up here at the top of the page where it says Med Kits. Go down there to the one that says Contagion Emergency Kit. Contagion Emergency Kit. That's the one you want, right, Dr. McCullough?
Right. That's going to cover bird flu. Just you start on day one. I think all the animal workers, people in rural areas need to have these. You can't wait around for the pharmacist. If you start early, that comes with telemedicine. We can intensify the antivirals, get other drugs going. Very affordable. Join through Brandon's website. Join as a member because we're working on ways to replace the used drugs. And you have to be a member to get that advantage.
Doug Billings, reminding you that conservatives are better looking than liberals.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Right Side with Doug Billings. Hey, by the way, given what we're going through in the world and in America, if you want to prep and if you want to be prepared, I want to introduce you to my new website, DougsBeef.com. Freeze-dried whole American beef, any kind of cut you want over there, DougsBeef.com. Head over, make a note of that, and just at your leisure, make sure you check it out because you want to have a stockpile of food that in case, we talk about EMP events or, power going down the grid, whatever, be prepared for whatever comes your way. I know that many of you are concerned about these kinds of things. And so I wanted to be able to provide you a place where you can go to shop and consider what you might want to have in your safe room and in your home should things go wrong. DougsBeef.com, American beef, freeze-dried, and easily prepared and delicious. DougsBeef.com, ladies and gentlemen. All right. So, hey, September 18th, the sentencing of President Trump. By the way, phone lines are open if you want to join in on the conversation. I forgot to mention 901-316-8404. 901-316-8404. Would love to have you be part of the conversation today about what we're talking about. 901-316-8404. So the sentencing date, September 16th, trying to brace you for this, September 18th. I've had a talk, along the way here this year, I've met a gentleman by the name of Will Scharf. He is one of President Trump's attorneys. He was running for the attorney general, of the state of Missouri. And we spoke about this some weeks ago, Will and I did. And I think that, even more than the Supreme Court's immunity decision, Another of its late-term rulings, which no one really knows about, by the way, I must say, we've all heard of the immunity case, and we all have I think, a rudimentary idea about how that applies to President Trump or any president who, when they conduct official constitutional acts, have immunity from being prosecuted for crimes. And that's as the founders intended, and it's what the Constitution obviously states. But there is another case out there that I think is also going to help President Trump's eventual appeal in all of this. The case that I'm talking about that will help President Trump is a case called Erlinger versus the United States. Erlinger, Erlinger versus the United States. And in that case, the Supreme Court reaffirmed that in criminal cases, important proof elements that affect the potential sentence have to be found unanimously by the jury. Well, Judge Merchan, to the contrary, denied President Trump the right to a unanimous verdict on the supposed crime, which, as you recall, is a conspiracy to influence the election by illegal conduct. That's the official charge. And what Bragg, the real beauty, Alvin Bragg, what he alleged that Trump did was to conceal information by falsifying his business records, which in every other case in the city of New York is a misdemeanor. But Bragg readjusted the rubrics around that crime and did what he did to turn it into a felony, and it was allowed to happen. And Bragg went around that 2-year misdemeanor statute of limitations. Bragg got around all of that. He campaigned on all of this. And once you realize, and all of that settles in your mind, you arrive at this main point. And again, I don't see how you can escape this. If you have any intellectual maturity whatsoever, you're forced, when you look at all the things that I've just laid out for you. The New York prosecution of President Trump was, again, political. It was not about justice. And when that happens, it's not the system of justice that engages it, but it's rather than a system or a weaponry, if you will, using what we call lawfare. When you throw justice out and use only political means and reasons whereby to prosecute, persecute other people, that is not justice. It's lawfare. And this is all going to work in President Trump's favor. Patience, my dear friends, patience. Because you see, the prosecutor, Alvin Bragg, and the judge, Juan Merchan, they're not concerned whether or not the conviction ultimately gets thrown out on appeal. They couldn't care less about that. Now, those things may well get thrown out on appeal. I think that they will. Once a reasonable judge or the Supreme Court sees this and hears it, it's going to be tossed. And it's not as if, you think about these things, and it's not as if Judge Merchan is actually going to put Trump in prison. It's not about that. He will sentence him to prison. I do believe that. But we can almost guarantee that Trump is going to get bail and, pending the appeal, which is the process, right? So it's what they're all about the optics of this, though. It's what I was talking about earlier, and they could really, it's like Harris and Walz running for the presidency. Ladies and gentlemen, the number one goal of the radical left communist socialist, formerly known as Democrat Party in this country, believe it or not, is not the presidency. That's not their number one goal. It's their number two goal, to be specific. Their number one goal with Harris and Walz is to move the political and social needle in this country further to the left. That's their primary goal. Now, of course, they'll take the presidency and they're going to run for it, but the goal is always to move the needle to the left, win or lose. So in the same manner, Judge Juan Merchan in New York and Alvin Bragg are not concerned or jail time. Now, they can get it, but their number is to smear Trump with the optics now of a judge who has sentenced him to jail. They don't care if he actually sits in a jail cell or not, but just to have those words. He's been convicted of the felonies, and now he's been sentenced to jail. That's what they're after. Those words, that mantra, that verbiage. They want it all. That's what they want. And he can position himself to Merchant can. Judge Merchant can position himself to be the hero because he can be the one who issues this sentence. Without ever having to see Trump in a jail cell, all he has to do is sentence him. They're working in coordination, I'm telling you, in tandem with the Communist Socialist Party. They're working together with Vice Pretender Harris and the media to do all of this to Trump, to smear him, to smirch him, to break him financially, to put him in jail. So a convicted felon sentenced to prison. Think of that. Coming up on September 18th, just a few weeks before Election Day in this country. And at a time when millions of Americans will be already voting early in many states. Not the least of which, as I mentioned earlier, is the state of Pennsylvania, a key battleground state. So I just think we should brace ourselves for this. We need to be prepared for it mentally. We need to be emotionally ready. We need to be intellectually ready to combat this. Be a voice for reason and truth. Be confident in the fact that no matter what happens on September 18th, I've already told you what will. He's going to be sentenced. I mean, it's intellectual. It's my intellect. It's my gut feeling. It's my common sense telling me this, all of it. Because as I look at the radical left, I cannot believe they're just going to stop with this persecution. They're going to push it as far as they can. I've been saying this since day one. September 18th, Judge Merchant will sentence President Trump to jail. He will appeal for bail immediately. He'll be granted the bail, and he won't sit in a jail cell. But they'll have those words, the radical left will. And the Harris-Walz campaign will campaign on those words. Be prepared mentally, physically, and intellectually to resist that and to speak the truth when you see it and when you hear it. When you hear and see those lies that they will utter, recount and countermeasure with the truth. And the truth is that Trump will prevail, that all of this will be thrown out eventually. We have to get through this together. Brace yourselves and be prepared together. Ladies and gentlemen, that's why this program, I think, is so important for us. Share the program with your friends. If you're watching on X, please follow me and subscribe over there. YouTube, subscribe, follow the show. Facebook, same way. WorldViewTube.com. Please check that platform. WorldViewTube.com has a plethora of programming that you will enjoy. Spreely TV also. And then finally, my website, DougBillings.us. I always ask you to prayerfully consider heading over there and making a contribution, a recurring monthly donation, so that I can continue. This is how I do it. I'm a one-man team. I'm here, me with you, and we walk together, shoulder to shoulder. We are in this together. But I can't continue the show without your help. So prayerfully consider DougBillings.us and setting up a monthly recurring donation. All right, ladies and gentlemen, take one final trip into the beauty of capitalism. I'll be right back after this break. Cheers.
We live in uncertain times. In fact, we live at a time when our own governments all over the world are warning us that there could be big problems with our power grid. World War III seems to be right on the horizon. Let me ask you this. Do you have a satellite phone? Should communications go down with cell towers? Do you have a satellite phone to get a hold of that college student or your spouse who travels, whatever it might be, to get a hold of your senior adult parents? We have satellite phones at worldviewtalk.com, and you get the satellite phone for free when you sign up for their very reasonable payment programs for the service. Sign up for the service with a reasonable contract, get the satellite phone for free. Worldviewtalk.com. You'll also find they have, well, what I now have, which is a solar generator. Yeah, I have a gas generator, an LP propane generator, but what if that goes down? I want to back up to my backup. So I now have a solar generator as well. You'll find them at worldviewtalk.com. Check it out today, worldviewtalk.com.
The Right Side with Doug Billings, coming to you from the fruited plains of America.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. The Right Side with Doug Billings. So today, laid out for you what is coming down the pike with regards to President Trump and the legal lawfare that he's facing. September 18th, a big day for us. August 16th, be looking for the ruling from Judge Juan Merchan from New York about all of this. And then September 18th, as I mentioned, big day, the sentencing of President Trump. Not that he's going to sit in jail, but just the fact, again, to reiterate, the left is after the words. Convicted felon, sentenced now. So that's what they're after. It'll all be, as I said, it'll all be overturned. It'll all be thrown out eventually. We just have to work our way through this. We intellectually prepare, we emotionally prepare, we physically prepare, and we spiritually prepare to endeavor to protect President Trump with the truth. So every chance you get, please remember, sharing this show is important. I put out clips, little snippets from the show from time to time on social media. Find those, share them. The more that we can get the word out, the more that we can help spread truth and light and support President Trump, the better. And because we need to do that, we look at what's arrayed against him, right? So the radical left, as I say, and I don't say it in a joking manner. I have said to you, this is a communist-socialist party now, the Democrats. They have blended communism, socialism together. Yes, there's Marxism in there, there's fascism in there, there's all of it. But about 4 years ago, I coined that term, communist-socialist, the formerly known as Democrat Party. They are not. Ladies and gentlemen, all you have to do is look at what they're doing. They are not a pro-America political party. They have absolutely no moral high ground to stand on to claim that, for example, what they're doing is what the founders intended, or that what the divine providence of God would want. In fact, they've gone to great lengths to excommunicate God out of their party platform. They've already done that. And if we think that packing the court, the Supreme Court, expanding the Supreme Court, or doing away with it, or setting term limits for the justices is what the founders had in mind, that's Kookville. It's absolutely not what the founding fathers had in mind. Ladies and gentlemen, the founding fathers gave us a divinely inspired recipe, if you will, for this republic. And for me, thank you very much. It does not need to be fundamentally transformed away from any of that. So you cannot, as a communist socialist, formerly known as Democrat, you cannot claim the title patriot within this country. You cannot. A patriot does not believe that America needs to be fundamentally transformed away from the divine providence of God and the intent of the founding fathers. These radical liberal communist socialists, formerly known as Democrats, are not and cannot be patriots. It's impossible. Now, that will make their heads explode. That will make them angry. But I put it to you as the truth. Now, we can have reasonable people, and there are John and Jane Doe on the streets of America who may have voted for Administrator Biden and Vice Pretender Harris, who are looking around this republic today thinking to themselves, this is not what I had in mind. And they're coming to our side in the millions. We must not get disheartened. I know that you see a lot of polls being posted, and a lot of social media talking heads and pundits are throwing these polls at us. And many of the polls are showing Harris with the lead. Look at those polls and shrug them up. Don't become complacent, but there's a thing called response bias. Response bias is based on polls that are given to people who would have voted or who would have responded in the ways that you would assume they would. So what they do is they poll people who have a high chance of being Democrat. Let's just use that as an example. If they're taking a who do you like better, Trump or Harris, and they go to a group of people who primarily would identify as a Democrat, commie socialist, right? And then they begin to ask them these questions. Well, those people's answers are going to be skewed towards Harris. And so the poll gets published and it looks as if, oh my gosh, it looks like everywhere I look, Trump is trailing Harris now. How is this possible? It doesn't make any sense. What we've seen for the last 4 years, the chaos, the crisis, all of it manufactured, all of it on purpose. Biden, it gets forced out. Kamala's in. Nobody even likes Kamala. We can go back just 2 years ago and show you montage after montage of clip where people just don't like her. She's not the candidate, but they've chosen her as a DEI hire, and now they're locked in. They're painted into a corner. So nobody likes her. Nobody likes the purposeful chaos and crisis that's surrounding us. How can these polls be coming out showing that Harris is in the lead? It just doesn't make any sense. Well, she's not in the lead. What they've done is they've asked a group of people who would have already selected Harris anyway. It's not like they're taking a sample of equal parts conservative, liberal, and it's called response bias. It's a real, Google it, look it up. And that's what these polls are reflecting. So continue to get involved in your local levels of government. Continue to have hope, because look what Kamala has done. First of all, what she hasn't done, she hasn't had a press conference in 25 days. Ridiculous. It's the campaign from the basement that we saw from Administrator Biden all over again. But when you look back at her record, she talks a tough game about being this prosecutor and sentencing criminals and so forth and so on. But that's what she has not done. If you really take a deep dive into her record, she has continually failed to prosecute with extreme prejudice violent criminals, giving 90-day jail sentences, 2-year jail sentences to black men for just having smoked marijuana. Now, I don't need to agree with that or not. I don't care. The legalized marijuana is not the topic. The point is that she sentences black men. That's a pretty stiff sentence for such a minor thing. I think most people would agree. But on the other side of that coin, violent offenders, rapists and murderers, arsonists, gun crime, not prosecuted. And if it is prosecuted, they're given very light sentences, and many times they're let out early. She frequently does this. She claims that she's tough on crime. She wants open borders, ladies. Nothing. This is an election year, so she's going to say everything to convince you that she doesn't. Here's one thing. I'll put it to you this way. Here's what Kamala Harris is. Kamala Harris is the one who will say this: if you elect me, I'm going to fix all of these problems. If you elect me and put me in office, I'm going to fix these problems. Excuse me, ladies and gentlemen, Kamala, you're already in office. How did these problems begin in the first place? Because of you. Purposeful, dedicated chaos and crisis. Oh, why would she do that, Doug? Why would she conduct purposeful chaos? We can look at any one of the reasons out there. The border is probably the most sensitive one out there. It's probably the most important issue on most people's minds, just outside of the cost of living and inflation and so the economy, right? So the border crisis. Why would she possibly want open borders? Because every one of those multiple millions of people coming across here represents another member of their electoral base. And every one of those millions of people coming across the border represents the chance to suffocate and diminish the American identity. That's what they're after, my friends. Look at Europe. Look at the UK. Look at the radical Muslim communities and what they're doing. The same thing happening here potentially. So much to look at. It's the liberal mindset, their patron demon of chaos. That's what if there's no chaos, if there's no crisis, they'll create one. And then they'll sit back and create false apparatus and false mechanisms by which they can solve that crisis. They'll pretend as if they want to solve it. And when we look at what the policies are over there on the left, we're left with no other possible conclusion, ladies and gentlemen, none, than what they want is chaos. They want violent crime in America to continue. Oh my gosh, Doug, that's harsh. How? No, they don't. They clearly look at what they've done. What else could possibly be the result of multiple millions of people coming into a country? Have you seen the people that have been murdered this week in New York? Because it's a sanctuary city and they can't turn these people over to ICE and to the Department of Homeland Security? Because it's a sanctuary state. And yet madmen go and kill and rape children on the streets of America. They want chaos, ladies and gentlemen, and they want violent crime. They want gun crimes to continue. Do you know why? Because then they can start talking about the nonsense of limiting or diminishing or ending the Second Amendment. If they don't want gun crime, why do not they prosecute with extreme prejudice men and women who are guilty of gun crimes? In every liberal state in this republic, I can show you case after case whereby a person convicted of gun crimes is oftentimes given a light sentence and in many cases let out early. Try to tell me that they don't want gun crime. We have enough laws on the books if they would just enforce them. It's the same old story. More chaos drives people to the arms of the federal government. That's what the liberals think, and that's what they want. They want you driven into the arms of the federal government so that it can protect you, and we cannot allow that to happen. We have enough laws if we would just get people in office who would prosecute them, and that's the task at hand for us in our states, in our local communities. That's where we must begin, to elect people that will make those things happen. Please, before I go, let me just remind you, bless yourself with pursuing the gift of wisdom with a capital W, wisdom from God, and reflect on these things that you hear me tell you. Then prayerfully take action, peaceful action, wisdom and action. Reflect also, I should say, wisdom and then reflect. Not we don't react like the liberals, but we reflect. Wisdom, reflection, action, and then finally, gift yourself with the virtue of patience and be prepared to see your work come true in time. Get prepared, get involved, please, ladies and gentlemen. And finally, as always, I ask you, prayerfully consider heading over to DougBillings.us, setting up a monthly recurring donation to the program so that I can continue to bring it to you. DougBillings.us, ladies and gentlemen. Listen, it is an honor to be with you every Monday through Friday, 5 to 6 Central Time, right here on worldviewtube.com, on X, on Rumble, on YouTube, Facebook, and on my website, DougBillings.us. God bless you and your families, ladies and gentlemen. Until we meet again, for the Republic. Cheers.